With so many differently priced airsoft guns on the market, it can be difficult to understand exactly what you will get from each one. And as many experienced players know, just because you spent a lot on a replica, that doesn't always translate to it performing well. It's not just about the parts either, it's about the experience that goes with each kind of gun. So in today's lesson, we'll be exploring some of the less tangible differences you can expect when comparing a budget gun that costs less than $100 to something that's a little bit more pricey. Getting into airsoft in Canada almost 15 years ago was a very difficult time for us. Our small town had hardly anything in terms of players, fields, or even guns. And what they did have was some pretty cheap spring-powered stuff. But realistically, we were only trying out the sport to see if we even liked it, so it seemed like a good idea. I mean, we had literally no experience with airsoft, so when we first got these guns onto the field, we were pleasantly surprised. At least until we tried shooting at each other instead of targets. The spring action guns meant a couple of things. One being a very slow fire rate, which made it extremely difficult to suppress targets or to hit them while they crossed openings. The second problem was the low power, which meant that we had to be within 40 to 50 feet to even be accurate, or the BBs would just start dropping off. We had to use our guns more like mortars than anything else. There was no way on earth we were ever going to be able to get competitive if we were going to keep using these things, and we knew that. With that being said though, we had an incredible amount of fun during that phase, and some of my favorite airsoft memories are actually from those first few years. As well, it was ultimately what pushed us forward to properly upgrading our arsenal in the following years. Now the next logical step was to get something with fully automatic capabilities, as the single shot life was quickly losing its charm. Not to say that it didn't make a comeback. So instead of spending a little less than $100, I decided to spend just a little more. What that got me was the Crosman Pulse R76, my first ever AEG that was basically unstoppable against the rest of the budget guns it was up against. This was pretty much all down to the faster fire rate and the almost doubled effective range. Now sure, it would get dominated by pretty much any other gun I have now, but that's not the point. At the time, it was a blessing, and it felt like I was finally getting into the sport. It had an amazing rate of fire, an actual fire selector, and even an adjustable hop-up. What's really remarkable is that it's been through so much in the 10 plus years that I've had it, and it still works to this day without needing to replace a single part either. So when someone tells you a plastic body gun can never last you, I'd take that with a grain of salt. Now let's jump forward a few years when we had proper jobs and some money to put into the sport, and this was my first investment. This is the MP5 SD6 Max series made by G&G. Back then, these were some of the only guns we could get shipped to us that were fully upgraded out of the box. Reinforced piston head and teeth, metal gearbox components, tight bore barrel, all packaged in a truly beautiful metal and poly blend body. Not to mention having some pretty wild power and accuracy to top it all off. Owning this gun gave me the confidence to know that my shots would land more or less where I wanted them to, and that alone is a priceless feature. Now, when you compare the gearbox of this one to my first AEG, the first thing that you'll notice is the difference in the quality of materials. Now, this isn't really an indicator of how long it's going to last though, because as I mentioned, the one with plastic parts has never needed anything replaced, but the G&G has had the gearbox case and the hop-up rubber changed already. This brings home the fact that the more power you put into something, the stronger it's going to have to be to endure the forces of it trying to tear itself apart. Looking back on it all, I think we really do owe our love for airsoft to the days when we had those budget guns. We didn't have the experience for it to matter, and no one we were up against had anything that cost more than a couple hundred anyway. We were just happy to be outside most times. Contact. We really hope this helped to shed a bit of light on what it's like to own these kind of guns. And if you've learned something or if you had fun today, then make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future airsoft education. And if you're trying to decide on how to buy your first gun, then check out this video here. Thanks so much for watching. Class is dismissed.